some level of comfort on the floor. You know, I don't guarantee comfort, I guarantee a level of comfort. Everything's relative, isn't it? And if you are fully lengthened like this, and some of you might want to keep your knees up because your back needs time to settle to the floor. However, you know, eventually if you're lying flat like this, at this moment, this position, Zoran will introduce this word to you as well. What does this position afford you? What does it offer you? What is the potential of this position? And your experience will probably tell you that some kind of effort would have to be exerted in order for you to move from this position, from this transition, because you're actually very stable in this position. Okay, so movement emerges from a position where we are less stable. So can you feel now how stable you are? And again, you know, from a biomechanical point of view, we can define stability and we can give it all the fancy jargon words, and we will do that for you, whether you need it or not. But can you experience stability? You know, you've got maximum contact, maximum base of support with the floor. The floor is stable. So therefore, for you to move will require more effort than from another position where you are less stable. So bend your knees up. Now you're still quite stable. However, if you went to sleep, what would happen? Your legs would drop. And then what happens if your legs drop one way? Then can you see that from the instability of having your legs up, that movement, a transition becomes more possible. So you can see a baby that's stuck on its back with its legs and arms long is stable for movement. So in order for the baby to start discovering movement, there needs to be a reduction in stability. And how did we do that yesterday? So bring your knees up over your chest. And now you're even less stable, right? So a tiny little movement of your knees to one way or the other. And again, so if you went to sleep in this position, what would happen? You would topple one way or the other. So what did we do yesterday? You interlaced your fingers and you lifted your head so that your head was freer, more free to move. You're even less stable. So a smaller movement of your head means that you're even more likely to topple. And you toppled, right? Do you remember toppling? So topple, go ahead. Go ahead and topple. There you go. So therefore, that is just one reason out of 100 why bending, learning how to flex against gravity in this instance is really important for a baby. So I work a lot with children with developmental delays. And when they don't have this capacity to shorten their flexors, the muscles in the front of them, and become unstable, they remain stable, i.e. they remain immobile. Yeah? So that's one reason why. Now, of course, there's other reasons why. This is, you know, and Zoran will pursue this more today around the eyes and how the eyes will direct movement. So it's not just about, movement is not just about being unstable. You know, the intent of it will come through, you know, the eyes or the senses of wanting to get somewhere. You know, and again, when I work with little children, they won't do Pilates, funnily enough. You tell them to do something and they won't do it. They'll only do something if there's a reason to do it. If there's a toy or something to explore. They are beautifully honest. And they won't muck about with the abstract. They'll do it if it feels good or if it gives them something. They're hedonistic. So that's our kind of primary driver for learning, which is, again, a Feldenkrais Christ thing. Not that we are hedonistic here, well, small h, hedonistic maybe. Now, there's another thing when I'm working with children, and when they learn to flex their legs up is, and we'll do this today, maybe I'm being a bit premature, is if your hands are free, so leave your head on the floor, but now bring your knees up over your chest again. And if you can bring your hands forward, you can find your knees, right? And, you know, you can find your feet. So I work with children who actually don't know that they've got legs because they don't explore them like this. So neurologically, little babies don't have good sensation in their feet. In fact, when they're born, they have almost no sensation. That's why you can do dastardly things with needles in their heels. They don't feel a lot. So when they start exploring the world, and their world includes their own body, they do it with their hands. So they find their toes and they find their knees and they find their genitals, and, you know, everything's up for exploration. It's all neutral to them in that sense. And if it means getting their toes into their mouth to suck on their toes, because that's how they'll really get to know their toes, and they will. So the little children that I see that don't do that don't know their feet, and I have to find ways in this kind of beautiful Feldenkrais way that they discover their feet, because I can't give them an exercise about that. You know, this is a journey that they have to find. They have to realize, feel, experience feetness. Yes? Okay. And that comes about through flexion. So that's just two reasons why flexion might be important. We can come up with a million more during the course of this lifetime. So lie on your back again. And this kind of chat that we've just had, where I go through just some reasons that might explain why we're doing something, this is what makes this a training program and not a public workshop so much. Okay, or not a weekly ATM class, because you don't actually need to know any of that in your daily life. This is now because you're entering a process where you want to explore things in more depth. Okay, is that sort of clear? Yes. Yeah. Oh, Anna, what a fabulous question. Yes. Yes, yes, exactly. Beautiful question, because, why is it a beautiful question? Because these first couple of days in Amherst, Feldenkrais is going mental, telling people to not write stuff down at all. And not at all, not during class. And if he saw anybody reach for a pen, he would go nuts. Now, this is something where some trainings say with that, do not write things down during class. Zoran and I and Jenny have talked about this a lot. And we're interested in what his intention was in not letting people write things down during class. What his intention is very clearly is that he does not want to interfere with your experience. So while I'm talking with you, and I think you said this in your question, Anna, is at some stage you want to write it down and take it from the experience into the thinking, into the language. So his intent was that if he was talking like this and people were busy writing, then they're immediately bypassing the somatic experience and they're going straight into language. And more to the point, they're encoding it in a shorthand of language. So it's not going to be as rich anyway. So that's his intention in prohibiting writing during class. Now, like any prohibition, it backfired, I think, on him big time in Amherst, because it sent the writing underground and it turned into a battle between him and the students, some students. And there was a lot of underground writing and passing around of notes and lots of, naughty children activity. I'm telling a story here, it's not true, but, so we're actually quite keen to modernize that actually and learn from the lessons of prohibition mistakes, that if you want to write stuff down whenever you want to write it down, you do. However, you understand why sometimes it's really important to just stay with the experience, because that's what we're interested in. Hence my conversation earlier about you are the textbook. Your body is the textbook. So what he says in Amherst, and what we really encourage people to do, is when you go home, you write down things, because then you will write it from your experience and not, so you will have stayed in your experience at the time, and when you go home, then you will write it, you'll take it out of your experience and your intellectual understanding and then encode it in a shorthand, i.e. language. And that will be a richer thing for you. Now, of course, and if you forget, so then there's this whole fear, but I've got to write it down because I'll forget it, which is where your question comes from in part. I'm not saying you're fearful because you look pretty chilled to me, but let's say, well, I've got to write it down because I want this idea. It's fantastic. This Susan, she's so bloody brilliant. I want to write down everything she says. So let's say that's your motivation. Let's just say that's your motivation. There's this kind of grasping business happening to knowledge. And that also is going to interfere with your learning. So there is this state of learning that is quite chilled and it's quite flowing in a way. So when you get that anxiety, and it's a small a anxiety, I want to write this down, of course, you can do that and understand where it's coming from. But just notice, is it that I'm worried about, that I'm going to forget something? Where does my motivation for writing it down come from? And now, of course, you guys are in this fabulous position that Amherst weren't, is that this is all recorded and you can go back anyway. So there is actually no reason to be anxious. You don't have to grasp onto anything because you can just get the recording and double check what Susan said. And you go, oh, actually, she's not as clever as I thought she was. She spun a little web of deceit. That might be your experience. So that's what we recommend. Now, Zoran and I are all, because we come from a sort of academic background, we put things on the whiteboard because we can't help ourselves. So you would have noticed already yesterday, Zoran sneaking up to the whiteboard and putting down something that I said. And that's what we do. So there will be, things that we think might need to land, visually or in a language kind of form, we will pop up there. And we will keep encouraging you to keep a journal of reflections. And I hinted at this yesterday, that we want to grow that skill. And if I say it's a requirement, then you'll all freak out because you all are budding anarchists already. But we want, part of the competency thing is gaining the skill to articulate your experience so that you can share it. Otherwise, it remains your experience only, which is fine. So if our vision for you is that not only do you have these rich experiences and you have the capacity to articulate them, we want to help you articulate them. And that means being able to write about your experiences, being able to actually put them into language, spoken language, as well as written language. So the journal, what we'd like to call a chronicle, we like the word because you're all Narnians, and you're going to have chronicles and you're going to be chroniclers. We will kind of formalize that, and there will be things that we will ask you to chronicle. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, you're an old sci-fi. Yes, the Chronicles of Zoran. Oh, yes. Yes, very good. So Jenny actually does have some journals, some blank journals up the back that you could purchase if you haven't. I think you're all well versed in how would you make that a pleasure to go home and write about your reflections. You might have some beautiful paper you want to write it on, or a beautiful book. Or I found my notes from the Melbourne One training, and they're yellowed with time. This daggy old pad. And lots of little bits of paper stuffed in, so clearly I was not well organised. However, we'll talk more about that. So I've covered quite a few things there. I covered the thing I actually intended to cover. Yes, I think I have. So shall we begin with the ATM? Unless there's any other questions. Oh, there are many texts. The text that would be nice for you to have in this first year is Awareness Through Movement. Yeah. It's his most accessible book. So his books are marvelous and dry. Yes, that's Anna's word. And dense. And they were written a while ago. You know, some of them were written in the 50s. So not always accurate, you know, and that he was drawing on an understanding, for example, in my area, an understanding of the brain that was not entirely accurate. So he's doing the best that he can, and he'll contradict the current knowledge of the time, like even in Amherst now, where he's talking about, you know, in the early 80s when Amherst was happening, for him to say that the rooting reflex is maybe the only reflex is quite a radical thing to say back then, because I was obsessed with reflexes, certainly in the 50s and 60s and 70s. The sort of new thinking around the brain was emerging in the 70s and 80s, and he is obviously hearing about it. But he would have been that would have been an early naughty thing to say. Anyway, and the rooting reflex is I got a bit excited there. No, it's when you touch a newborn baby, and you touch their cheek, stroking from the corner of the mouth outward, and they'll follow, and then they'll latch onto it. Yeah. Then if you're a special ed teacher, you'll still be wedded to reflexes, but that's my current mission in life. So I'll stop right there. Have you got a question? Oh yeah, we'll do that. Yes. Let's think. It'll happen sometime today. Yeah, we will. You share till your nose bleeds as well. But you can hear why, hopefully, that again, if we're coming back to this as an experiential method, and it's self-referencing in the first instance. And I think a lot of people have come up with that's where it stays, that they stay self-referenced, and this is all about me. And I think, again, Zoran and Jenny and I have a very shared vision that this work is for if I say this work is for the world, you'll think I'm a wanker. Well, that's actually what we mean. We actually do mean that, and we are wankers. But we're kind wankers, because it's nice wankers. I'm looking at Jenny and Zoran to make sure that they're not offended by what I'm saying. This doesn't stay at hedonism, is what I'm trying to say, is that in order for you to really understand and be aware of yourself, that then means that you're a better person for us to let loose in Box Hill and Melbourne and Victoria and Australia and the world. Because we will let you loose, because we're in control. Jenny and Zoran, have I offended you? Is that okay? You're happy to share that vision? Yes. Now, the other thing to say is that Australian assistant trainer sort of community is very close. So hopefully you've picked it up already, but Julie, who's downstairs with the other group, and Stephanie, who you'll meet some point in Melbourne, and Zoran, myself, and Jenny, and there's other assistants floating around. We work a lot together, and we really like each other. So we talk about stuff a lot. So just really get that impression that we're very much a strong team. Stephanie and Zoran and I trained together. Julie was in the Sydney training around the same time. Particularly Julie, Zoran, Jenny and I have worked together a lot, sort of team teaching in the last 2 Melbourne trainings. This is the third that anyway, I won't go into the maths. Okay, so let's do some ATM. Remembering this is